Good morning. Good morning, Europe, and welcome to the webinar we will have today about MIABIS. Yesterday I was in Portugal to visit the big upcoming network they have created in a very short time. And one of the things we did during the visit was they wanted to show us their biobank in the big hospital in Lisbon. And after a while they wanted also to show us their limb system, it's a laboratory limb system, and they proudly said, "Have you seen? We have implemented MIABIS. Have you ever heard about it?" I become extremely happy because I heard this now many times visiting different biobanks in Europe, that MIABIS is sort of their standard operating procedure to do this in the limbs or whatever they got for connecting their samples. I will shortly give some background why I started this MIABIS stuff, and then we will talk more about the future of MIABIS and what has changed from the first release to the second one that we're now releasing. And also at the end of the webinar, we will also have some discussion about things. From time to time, I'm asked, when did it start, the thinking of MIABIS? And it sort of got a long history. It actually started already 2003. I have the documents here, they are in Swedish. At that time, I was working with one of my employees, Pontus Lindqvist, who then became an executive at the IBM. We were talking about to make an XML tree of trying to connect Swedish biobanks. So that was the start. It was extremely ambitious. We had something we even called timestamp for samples, where we wanted to follow the history of the samples when it came in, when it came out, when DNA was extracted, etc., etc. The thinking of this was never implemented, but it was a good thinking that was also the one we actually used when we started BMRI preparatory phase. As most of you know, the preparatory phase started 2008, and I was responsible for the biobank informatics group. And it grew to a quite big group with more than 30 people, more than 16 countries. And one of the tasks for that group were what at that time what we were calling some kind of minimal data set for biobanks. And we started that work, and I still remember when we had the big meeting in Klagenfurt at Professor Johan Neder's place, where at the first time we had two communities, the sort of the blood community and the tissue community discussing attributes for biobanks. And it turned out that we had a total different view how we should define things, because there were two communities that not had working close together for years. But at the end of the day, we had a common sense that we really have to define this clearly, and we did. So we created sort of some kind of, let's call it a metadata set or minimum data set for biobanks that we were presented in the final document of the preparatory phase. And then, as you know, the preparatory phase ended in the beginning of 2011, and then it took about 3 years until the BMRI was launched. And during that time, I continued to work with this, what we did during the preparatory phase, and after a while, realizing that we really need something like a created catalog, we started to work with what we later called MIABIS in BMRI Sweden. For our catalog purposes, and we published that in 2012. And it's still, we published it in Porosity and Biobanking, and it's still the most downloaded paper ever in the history of this journal. Even if it's not cited so much, it's still the one that is most downloaded. So we started to use this first version, but during this phase, between preparatory phase and the beginning of BMRI, there was also a lot of working groups in the informatics after the preparatory phase who started to think more about this, how we should develop MIABIS. And after a while, we had a Nordic group meeting in Stockholm. That group was extended later on in a big meeting we had in Copenhagen, where Germany, EBI was there from Hingston, France, etc., etc. So it started to become a European group that actually was talking about how MIABIS should be for the years to come. And then also this thinking to make it as bricks was born, Lego bricks basically, where we always need the first brick to actually be able to connect biobanks, and then also start to new bricks for other things. And one of the new bricks we've done recently is in the big RD, Rare Disease Connect project, where they're going to use MIABIS for Rare Disease catalog, not only in Europe, but also in the collaboration work we do with NIH and Australia. We also had a big meeting during Hands-On Biobanks in Hague with this big informatics group that continue to think about how the future of MIABIS should be. And that group has been growing. And after I decided to take the job as the head of BIMAR-ERIC, my colleague Gloriana Norlin here at Karolinska continued with regular meetings with people from Europe to start to implement the thinking of the next version. So before I leave the word over to Gloriana to tell what's been ongoing lately, some housekeeping rules from Michaela first.
Hello, everybody. So the virtual housekeeping rules of this webinar are fairly simple. We give the floor to Gloriana, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end. We only have a couple of people on board who can actually raise the questions verbally by speaking into their microphones. Most of you only are logged in listen mode only. So please, whenever you feel a question popping up, just put it in the chat space, which is on the right side of your screen. And any question you put in there will be public, visible to everybody. And in the end, I will function as your moderator and make sure that the questions are properly addressed. And now I hand over to Gloriana.
Thank you, Michaela. And I have the honor today to present the work that has been done within the working group from 15 people in the BIMAR-ERIC working group of MIABIS. And I will start to give you a background, because I'm not sure that everybody has heard everything. So let's start. I'll start by reading the initial definition that was published in 2012. It says that MIABIS represents the minimum information required to initiate collaboration between biobanks. The aim is to facilitate the reuse of bioresources and associated data by harmonizing the information. It should be viewed as a guideline for MIABIS. The scope is to facilitate communication, which is achieved when everybody speaks the same language, stimulate research collaborations, making research more efficient, and hopefully MIABIS can help towards establishing biobanks as a domain within the field of life sciences. And MIABIS covers information for sharing data between biobanks. It has little to do with the internal requirements of a biobank, such as the workflows and the everyday processes of the biobank, breathers, the instruments. But usually most of the attributes that we have in MIABIS are already present in these biobank link systems, although they might not be in the exact same format. But the information is usually often recorded. This is a data pyramid that some former colleagues of ours did, and I like it because it's very illustrative. It shows what MIABIS covers today. The lowest level of the pyramid, where it says sample and donor data, is typically what you would store in your biobank management system or in your research group. And the upper two levels consist of descriptive metadata and aggregated data that tells you what you have in your biobank. And that is what the current MIABIS core consists of. And yeah, before going to the details of this MIABIS core, I would like to, Jan-Erik already presented the background, but just to point out some key events leading up to today's version, MIABIS 2.0 core. I say here that it started within the BBMI preparatory phase, but it started earlier than that. But during the preparatory phase, a recommended data item set was presented or developed that would that recommended which data elements could be extractable from a biobank, and it consisted of a three-level hierarchy covering biobank, study, and subject and samples, and it was 21 attributes at the time. And that was the basis that we started working on for the first version of MIABIS, which we published in 2012. That consisted of 53 attributes spread over 2 levels, the biobank and the sample collection / study level. At about the same time, we also launched our wiki site where we updated the MIABIS information openly. In 2013, MIABIS was ontologized, creating the first ever biobank ontology, and this was done in collaboration with Matthias Bruchthausen at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and we are still collaborating with him for updating this for MIABIS, the ontologized MIABIS version. In November 2013, at the meeting in Vienna, a working group was established with representatives from 5 countries at that time. The scope was to work on the governance and shaping of MIABIS 2.0, so the next version of MIABIS. Some countries joined after the working group, and during the past year we have had some 15 occasions with telephone conferences where we have been discussing how to shape MIABIS. And that resulted in the MIABIS core in November 2014, which consists of 37 attributes divided over 3 core components that I will introduce shortly. But before I do that, I want to briefly describe our work process. MIABIS is maintained through an extensive procedure where new attributes can be proposed and voted on by each country. We have been following the so-called Moscow prioritization or Moscow method to reach consensus on the attributes. And then all group members have been encouraged to participate on the basis of their availability, expert knowledge, and their country's specific needs or area of interest. We have been seeking as much agreement as possible. In those few cases where it was not possible, we have been discussed if the attribute should be excluded on a short term or if inclusion was really essential. And we have been very careful not to, to discourage group manipulation tactics, let's say. So let's have a look then at the results of the MIABIS 2.0 core. The data element list consists of a total of 37 attributes divided over 3 core components. And it is a reduction in the number of attributes from 53 to 37, which is just in favor for everybody and for a minimum data set. And the 3 core components are biobank, sample collection, and study. And the link that you see here below is where we have published this information open on the web. The biobank component is the smallest component. It only consists of 8 attributes. I'm sorry about the quality. I see that it's a little hard to read I'm not going to go through them because you can do that yourselves. I think it'd be boring if I will read them, but I will try to point out some important bullets for how we have started when we create this. And in all components, we have tried to structure the data as much as possible. In Biobank, we do allow a lot of free text. We have one structured data element here, which is contact information, and the scope is that it can be reused by other components as well. So it basically says how you should, if you have contact information, this is the recommendation of what you should record and in what format. We have another structured data element, which is disease, which is presently used in the sample collection component. And it says that as long as you specify the ontology and ontology version, the code, you can use any ontology you like. So we don't limit ourselves to anything. The sample collection component is of 14 attributes describing what is good to have about a sample collection. We have a lot more text lists here. We try to reduce the number of free text fields as much as possible. For instance, for the storage temperature, we have looked at spec and completely spec compliant. For the material type, we have mainly been using the NCI definitions. So we have not tried to reinvent anything and instead use what has already been defined in literature before. And again, this is the minimum recommended information that you should store. Usually you have a lot more information that you store about the sample collection. But at least you should store these in order to be able to exchange data in a manner that it is also useful in order to start collaborations. The study component doesn't really differ much from sample collection. We have these two notions of sample collection and study. There isn't a clear definition in literature yet of these two terms, but the relationship between these two, study and sample collection, are many to many, and the study can be used in a subset of samples from multiple sample collections. And that is why also we have a repetition of attributes in the study, and only a few new attributes, such as the inclusion criteria is specific for study, total number of sample donors and number of participants are study specific. And the reason we have these three components, biobank, sample collection, and study, in the core of MIABIS, is because MIABIS is catalog driven. So today it doesn't apply as well to clinical biobanks. But the simple reason for that is that we have not yet had time to finish those components. We have started proposing additional components within the working group, but as you heard when I described our work process, it's quite extensive to reach consensus, and it takes a lot of time from people that are doing a lot of other things in their everyday job. So we have just briefly started to propose additional components. We also publish them on the wiki, but as they are not final, I will not go into them more in detail here, except that they are more on the sample level and on the donor level. And currently we have four components still under consideration. There are a couple of reasons for adopting this modular design of MIABIS. It's easy to adapt and to extend. Now, hopefully the core of MIABIS is stable as it is now, after 1 year of work and agreement on what should be in there. But it's also maybe more important, and yeah, it's easier for the biobank community to accept the core components, we think. But most important, it will be easier to implement MIABIS, as biobanks and researchers only implement the components that are relevant to them. And we're soon going to hear Roxana talk more about implementations and integrations, but I just want to list a couple of projects that we know are using MIABIS in their catalogs. There might be more, but these are the ones that I think that you're surely aware of. And I also want to just show 2 examples of what can look like when you implement MIABIS in your catalog. Here is the Dutch biobank catalog developed to federate local and national biobank catalog. It can host 4 levels of information, and the biobank and study levels are using custom or MIABIS standard format. With the attributes implemented. And another example, the Swedish sample collection register with descriptive data about studies and sample collections using human biological samples in Sweden. It is using all core MIABIS components and also the on-office component, which is currently under proposal within the working group. And I think both of these you can explore yourself free on the web at least. A little bit about our future tasks. We will continue developing the additional components within the working group, work on the governance of MIABIS. We will collaborate. We have initiated collaborations with LIMS companies. I think it's 2 or 3, we'll tell you more about that, to implement MIABIS in their system. We have to, of course, harmonize with other efforts and look what others are doing. We have a plan now to publish the MIABIS 2.0 and also continue working on the ontologizing biobank ontology based on this second version, because it has changed quite a lot. And yeah, the ultimate goal is to establish MIABIS as the de facto standard within the BMRI ERIC. And I have actually reached my last slide. I really hope that I haven't been talking too quick. I can't do anything about that now anyway. But yeah, very dedicated and skilled people are part of this working group. We'll get declarations of interest from time to time with people that want to join. Now I want to leave the floor to Roxana to tell you more about MIABIS integration. Thank you for your attention.
So we have received 2 questions, which are actually clarifying questions that are visible in the public chat site. I read them out. Oh, now 3rd question is coming in. Of the MIABIS Core 2.0, which fields are mandatory to be filled in?
So that is a very good question. I mean, all and none. So we don't have any mandatory fields in MIABIS, but our strong hope is that it is so basic that you will be able to fill in all of them. But we haven't made any fields mandatory in the sense that you have to fill this in, because it's up to you, and MIABIS is really only a recommendation. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. When you use MIABIS in a practical way, for example, if you use MIABIS in a catalog or in a living system, you are talking about data elements that they are dynamic. It's not that you put a data once and that's it. So it's something that is changing constantly. So the thing to put some mandatory field, obviously, in the end, we'll try to have some mandatory fields, but they are going to be really basic. And the rest is about the recommendation, and it depends on the process that you are going to implement to share data. And that's why we cannot fix the mandatory fields in a strict way.
Is this question now clarified, or would there be any follow-up question linked to this specific question, the specific answer? I take that the first question is accordingly answered. The second question is, what is the purpose of study and its definition?
As I said, there isn't a clear-cut definition of a study in the literature, in the context of biobanks. On our wiki page, we do say that we are using the NCI definition of a study, which is a detailed examination, analysis, or critical inspection of a subject designed to discover facts about it. It's a general definition of study, which we are using at this point in time, because there isn't any other definition for the context of biobanks. I hope that answers the question about the definition. What the purpose is to conduct research. And when it comes to biobank, we usually, at least still do today, conduct research on biological samples. So a study is these examinations of these samples in order to get knowledge about them, which is the purpose of the study. I don't know if that answers the question. Or was it more a question of why we have both sample collection and study? Or
I kindly ask our friends from Belgium to clarify if question 2 has been answered, or if it would lead to any follow-up questions.
Okay, I can also mention, okay, good. I can also mention that there will be an updated version of a biobank lexicon where all these definitions for these terms will be made more clear in the context of biobanks, as they are not today.
Wonderful. We can now go to question 3. I keep reading them out just in case somebody is not on video in any way or cannot access the computer screen properly. Question 3 is, will MIABIS 2.0 include the sample level in the near future?
It will, yes. And we have already published on our wiki page, which you have the link here in my presentation. We have already published, but made it very clear that it's currently under proposal within the working group. It's not final, but we have a couple of very basic attributes for samples, which we already have as a starting point. But you sort of use them on your own risk because they aren't finalized within the working group and haven't gone through our procedure of voting and debate. So we have it, we will definitely work on it in the near future. And hopefully we will include both liquid and tissue samples.
Morris stated here as regards to question 3, we're working on this, and David is practically working on it from BBMRI NL and CTMM trait, so input is welcome. As Laureana says, it is in this proposal phase.
Thanks, Morris.
Then we have question 4. Are there any predefined interfaces for the data handover, XML, LDIF for LDAP, SQL, and what specifics if yes?
Yeah, I will talk a little bit about this in the presentation. So,
okay, then we have question 5. Will the inclusion of the sample level change the ERD, entry relation diagram?
Yeah, it will change slightly. If you're referring to the one that we have published now on the 50, slightly it will, yes. Hopefully that will not be too much trouble for you. Probably not. Okay, so I leave the floor to Roxana. That's okay. Michaela?
Yes, that's absolutely okay. We do not have any further questions, and if we missed out on anybody, there is still a chance at the end of the seminar. Morris adds, as regards to question 5, we expect it will be an extension that doesn't change the core object, but just refer to those entries, biobanks, and sample collections. Now, Belgium just entered a 6th question, that is, what is the difference between donors and study donors?
Please help me recall where you see this difference.
I call upon our Belgian friends to clarify here.
And I have just a little clarification, Michaela, if I can, regarding the response 5 to the response to the question 5, Morris. As you were reading it, it will only refer to those entities, not entries. Entities means biobanks or sample collections, so it will only create pointers in the ERD diagram to the old entities, and hopefully it will not change the existing entities.
Perfect. Thank you for this clarification.
Okay. We have to speed up, but we can come back to question number 6 if it's specified a little more. Please.
yes. Okay, good morning, everyone. I will continue with the presentation. I'm using the metaphor MIABIS from the roots to the fruits. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the use of MIABIS in a more practical way. So Laureana has already talked about the origin of MIABIS, how we have formed the group, and how we're working together to get the MIABIS core. And now we'll try to see MIABIS in the practical way. So one of the fundamental problems that we want to solve is and we want to contribute with MIABIS is the biobank interoperability. So one answer to this, all the biobanks, for example, they have their information management system, LIMS system. And the interoperability is just that two biobanks, for example, we have here two biobanks. Germany wants to communicate or to share bioresources with France, and you can do it automatically. You can do it from your interface from both biobanks. And one solution is to create the software or to make the software MIABIS compliant. And in the LIMS system, when you think about the LIMS system, the most of the LIMS, they have configuration possibilities that make possible also to change the data model at the database level. So it could be a little bit hard, but it's something doable, and it's something that is a good solution to be able to start this interoperability process. And now right now, there is a great cataloging initiative in our community. So the new catalogs and national nodes, they can adopt MIABIS easily because the data model is not a complicated one. Another problem, and this is a fundamental problem from biomedical science, is to be able to systematically link the sample with the knowledge generated by the samples in the way that it could be reusable for other studies. So the MIABIS core provides information about biobanks and population and study, and this is a very high level of information. But the additional components, they are the ones that they are going to be responsible to guarantee this, to close the research cycle of biomedical research, including biobanking. As you see here, you have the biobank, the researcher get the sample from the biobank and make the experiment, generate raw data, for example, and then make the analysis on the data and get the analysis data, the process data, get the paper, and the reference to the paper. But in the actual conditions, we don't have this feedback from the research to the biobank. And if we include in MIABIS the right component to be able to connect samples with data and knowledge, that's the way that we are going to contribute to close this research cycle. So the other issue is, for example, what the biobank is going to do, how to export data from the biobank to the catalog, how to communicate with the catalog. From the point of view of the information science, there are many solutions. I mean, this federation, cloud, centralization. The important part is if all the biobanks, they contain in their data model the right semantics to be able to communicate. Another question is, for example, are we going to try to approach our implementation to a more modern solution, which is, for example, using the linking data, using the unique resource identifier, and then that's the way that the web works, the web of things. Maybe we can think in the same sense. And another issue is the visualization. Once we are able to catalog everything in the biobanks and put it on the web or make it available for researchers and other biobanks, how are we going to visualize all the data? Because it's a lot of data with different categories, and that's an important question that we could think about in the future. And Austria, the Austrian nodes, they have already some interesting solutions that maybe we could try to see together. So what I'm saying, the technology is there. We just have to embrace it. And embrace means, for example, not only from the technical point of view, it means a lot of things regarding, for example, the economical resources to be able to implement all these things. But we are using this technology of sharing everything every day. So we are used to do that. I am really talking about this. Everybody's sharing everything every day. So we should embrace this technology somehow to be able to be in the same track. And I know that many of you are thinking about this. Ethics and regulations, of course, when we are talking about human data, human samples, then we have to take also care of personal data protection. And when we are talking about research or scientific data, we have to think about intellectual property protection. So MIABIS doesn't cover ethics and regulation. That's something that in the future we have to think about in our community and in collaboration with ethics common services to be able to translate the ethical framework to something which is that information system can manage. So the same thing that we are going to do with MIABIS, maybe we should do it also in the future for ethics and regulation, and that could be a very interesting for our community. So MIABIS core represents the biobank data at the metadata and aggregated levels. It means that we don't have so far to deal with ethics and regulation. And this is not exactly like that. Everybody knows that aggregated means that you have to be careful in the way that you aggregate the data to don't affect the privacy of the data of the sample donor. But so far, that's not the part of MIABIS. That's not MIABIS' responsibility. As I said, we have to think also in how to integrate MIABIS with other components and other actors in the research process. So now, to be able to use MIABIS, because MIABIS right now is in a way of guidelines, and you can see in the BBMRI wiki, you can go there and explore and see all the components with the attributes and the structure and everything. But now, to be able to use it in information system, we need to have a formalization of the data. For example, we are already working in the XML schema definition for MIABIS, class model definition also, and there is already an ontology that we are going to continue working with. And this ontology, I think, is a very good thing to do because that's the way to represent MIABIS in the web language. So we are going to be able to get knowledge out of the representation of MIABIS, get knowledge about the sample of the study and the data and everything, in the same way that is done with the new technologies for representing knowledge. So here, for example, we see that's a fragment of the XML schema, and this is a contribution from BBMRI, the Netherlands. And here is a fragment also from the ontology on MIABIS, that there was a collaboration with Matthias Brockhausen from the University of Arkansas for Medical Science, and he will be involved also in the definition of the MIABIS based on MIABIS 2.0. So for our community, what we should do as a community is to disseminate the existence of MIABIS in the national nodes, and also when we are in our catalog process, cataloging our biobank is also good to use MIABIS. And also if we are involved in projects that they are in the way to develop new management system for biobanks or for research, or interfaces between programs and so on involving biobank data, well, we should also think about using the MIABIS data model. So now we are going to pick up the fruits from our efforts. So when we are talking about raising awareness about MIABIS, we are doing this with LIMS providers. For example, Aware, it was an example from January. They have already implemented MIABIS. There is a couple of open source LIMS, Open Specimen from a company in India, and BKLIMS from South Africa. That they are also starting with the collaboration with us to implement MIABIS in their LIMS. And this is really relevant because BKLIMS, for example, has been developed for SAMBI, which is the South Africa National Bioinformatics Institute, and they are willing to spread these LIMS all over Africa. So MIABIS is going to be used quite widely. And when we are talking about cataloging, some national nodes, they are already implementing MIABIS in their nodes. And it was Loriana has been already talk about this. BCNet, for example, which is the biobank network from IARC. IARC is the International Agency for Research on Cancer. we are collaborating with IR, creating a catalog of samples for this network, which is spread all over the world. They have biobanks in all continents. We are also collaborating with RD Connect and Austria and the Netherlands, and involved in this project also, as well as Karolinska Institute. And the biomed breaches, also they have already mapped the MIABIS in the biobanks biosample database, which is really good, because then we are also close to more close to the research area. And when we are talking about metadata model for services and tools, there is a very interesting and exciting project called the Biobank Cloud with an exceptional team, and they are developing a platform for next generation. Actually, it's for genome data storage and analysis, and they are using very novel way to solve the problem of parallelization and everything. And MIABIS is part of the data model to represent the biobank data. Another interesting infrastructure, which is UDAT, is a EU project providing infrastructure for research, and they have a very interesting concept. The idea is to put together research, and it doesn't matter the domain, but they want to find knowledge among domains in the research, and they want to provide researchers with tools. For example, they are creating tools like a YouTube for research, or the Dropbox for research, or those kind of things. And they have, it means that several parallel computer centers around Europe, and also storage center around Europe, they are collaborating in this project. This project has finished the preparatory phase, and they will start in the second phase. And in the biomed breaches, this year is going to deliver a common interface for federation through MIABIS. It means that it will be possible to have a web service where biobanks can use to extract data with their own particular semantic. So you can keep your idiosyncratic semantic in your biobank, but then you can communicate using MIABIS with another biobank. That it will be this web service to take your data, translate it to MIABIS, and put it in communication with other networks. That's the idea. So, and this is what I have to do this because I am involved in the Biobank Cloud, so it's a little bit of dissemination, and it's going to be a webinar about this. So if you see the link, go to the website and see. It's really exciting project. You can get the Biobank Cloud with everything. You upload the platform, if you have the infrastructure, you have your cluster, your servers, and everything. And you install everything, and the Biobank Cloud will take care of everything, including, and they are trying to implement also a LIMS in the Biobank Cloud. It's not part of the project, but they are trying to also to achieve this, to make the interface more friendly for biobankers. Well, what to do? Biobankers and researchers, we try to make our system Miami compliant if possible, or map our system to be able to see we have our system with the requirement from MIABIS. Keep track of sample usability, because in the future it's not going to be only this high level of information, will be also at the sample level, and would be great if it's possible to get knowledge about sample as deep as possible, even including quality. Well, find your catalog in your national nodes, in your country, and try to expose the data that is possible to share. And I mean, we are here, the MIABIS working group will be working together to deliver the next generation of MIABIS. So, and embrace the open data and open science spirit, and we'll keep in touch. But I think I have nothing to say. To say thank you to everybody working in this working group, and thank you to all of you, because you have been participating in this webinar.
Thank you. We still have the open question, what is the difference between donors and study donors? And so far we have not received any new questions.
Yes, I mean, I don't know where these two words, where they are present in I don't recognize the difference, donors and study donors, that we use that somewhere. Could you please specify, help my memory?
But maybe I can say something. When you are talking about clinical data, you talk about donors, and they are not participating in some studies. They are donors, and they are providing a sample for sample collection, for example, but they are not part of a study. That could be the difference. But we don't have this difference in our model because we use participants. So a participant could be a participant for a sample collection, or could be a participant for a study.
We have sample donors in the study component. And the difference is that not all the participants in a study necessarily donate samples. They can donate other things, such as answer questionnaires or surveys, or they can provide health data, but not necessarily samples.
It has not been specified on the ERD. We see data sets called donors and a data set called donors study.
So let's look at that.
Yeah, this entity relationship diagram, that's based on MIABIS 1 because we haven't published the MIABIS 2.0. So this is the first version of the entity relation diagram, but we have to we change it lightly with MIABIS 2.0. But the name in the diagram, I don't think it's true.
I'm sorry, Loriana, could you repeat your last statement? You were not audible.
Yes, this is a version of the entity relation diagram, which was made based on MIABIS 1.0. And the next version, because this is the last question, the next version will be out with the publication of a paper.
And when can there be an updated version?
Yes, the updated version will be out after or at the same time with the publication of a paper.
All right. I think this question is now clarified. There is one question from Kajsa Silander. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. What is the timetable for having a joint MIABIS catalog for BBMI? Eric?
Okay, so the timetable is that we will have some first version after this summer up and running, saying that mean basically that connect the present catalogs we have out in Europe, but we have started this framework. But then there is a process, because we like to build a gateway that never been done before, that also describe the samples in a way that we haven't done before either. And the tools upcoming after the SPEEDA project that will create different kind of standards is what we are going to use.
All right, are there any further questions? I'm inviting everybody to, we still have 4 minutes until the official end of the webinar.
I would like to say something very short. Some national notes, they have already developed catalogs. So I think that the best idea is to get in contact with them and try to reuse what is already done. For example, the Netherlands, they have the Molgenis, which is a very interesting catalog. Austria also has their own platform for this, and I'm sure that people is willing to collaborate to, instead of we are creating more and more catalogs, we use what is already there and implement for the national node using the same platform as others are using, because it will make easier the integration of catalogs.
I could not agree more to this statement, to kind of connect the various national nodes and the excellent work that has been done. We have one more question from Maimouna Mendy. What do you expect to complete the integration of MIABIS with open system and BRICA LIMS?
That's a very good question. We have started the conversation with them. Open Specimen, they have mapped the core MIABIS already, and they know what to do. And we have a meeting next week to talk about this, when we can make the whole implementation. But the important thing here is that they are willing to do that, and they are really excited with the idea of having MIABIS in their system. So new people, new biobanks or researchers trying to get LIMS, they can get open LIMS. Open source LIMS with MIABIS already implemented. But I cannot say about the date, not yet. But I know it's not complicated for them to implement.
Everything as regards to dates, the headquarter does its best to bring the information together and spread it widely. I think it's time for concluding remarks. Loredana, would you like to say something? Or Jan Erik?
I can conclude here. I think I'm sort of fascinating about the process of the whole thing, because we are usually talking about connectors between different systems, and many different kind of big research projects out there have different kind of connectors to do things, and this is actually the most important thing we've done when it comes to informatics in biobanking, and I think we mostly done things right, but also this is a community process, so everybody who can contribute in different ways must call Loredana or me or somebody to join the group, because as I said in the beginning, this is sort of the first brick, the first Lego brick, and this is just the beginning of the story. And the interest to try to do this in a brick way is enormous, because I think also that is the way for the future. We didn't mention that we're also working with the big European Cancer Group, for example, and also other groups that we are sort of starting to define attributes. So I think this MIABIS is going to be sort of a success story. And for example, also we are invited this year to the ISPER, the Canadian-American group of biobanking, to present also MIABIS in US, because they have an interest even there to start to implement it. I also will come back at the end also with definition that is still a problem. Somebody brought that up in the beginning, what do you mean by a study, etc. And also if you look at our wiki, during PGG, we started to define a biobank lexicon that actually was called version 1, that are still on the PGG website. And during the preparatory phase, we also started to define a couple of items that are important for the biobankers globally. And we also, if you look at the wiki, translated that to 10 different languages. Now the interest for the biobank lexicon has also grown, both from Saudi Arabic countries, from China, from US, Canada, etc. And recently, as we talked about many times, we also have a new community, the lawyers, who define things in their text differently like the biobank words does. So we are also, as a sidetrack, MIABIS is going to set up a global group for definition of terms, and also try to get some consensus, both by legal and by the researchers in the biobank community, how things should be defined. And also there are already a lot of very good definition out that the OECD and others has been done. But we also, in a recent paper, has been showing that people actually use the definition in different ways. So that there is still work to do when it comes to definition. So with that, I will thank you for joining this webinar, and please join us because this is an extremely important work. Thank you.